Today is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026.
Yeah. It's a date that really just sits heavy on the calendar, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, I was looking at the calendar this morning and it just hit me that we are exactly 4 years into this.
4 full years.
Right, 4 years since the tanks first rolled across that border and since the air raid sirens started going off in Kyiv. You'd think by now, 4 years in, we would have seen everything this war has to throw at us.
You would think so. I mean, 4 years is a long time. It's the
Why
entire
so-
duration of the First World War. It completely changes a society.
Exactly. And usually when we do these deep dives on an anniversary like this, we're talking about the front lines.
Right.
We're talking about the grind in the Donbass or reconstruction efforts or maybe unpacking some new military aid packages. But
Today's different.
today we are looking at something that feels like it belongs in a, well, like a corporate boardroom thriller, not a war documentary.
It's a story that definitely blurs the lines between warfare and global finance.
To put it mildly, because the big story today on this really grim anniversary isn't about a new Russian offensive. It's about a formal diplomatic complaint that just came out of Washington.
And crucially, it was sent to Kyiv.
Which is already unusual, right? The United States is Ukraine's biggest backer, and they have formally warned Ukraine. And the reason for this warning is the part that I am having trouble wrapping my head around.
It is definitely counterintuitive.
The U.S. isn't mad because Ukraine hit a civilian target or, escalated tensions with nuclear rhetoric. They are mad because Ukraine attacked a military-adjacent target inside Russia, and it hurt an American bank account.
Well, specifically, it hurt the bottom line of some very powerful American corporations.
So we are in this bizarre situation where the U.S. is funding the war effort, sending the ammo, but essentially saying, please don't bomb the enemy right there because we have equity in that building.
It sounds incredibly cynical when you put it that way.
Yeah.
But that is effectively the friction point we are dealing with today. It's a clash between military strategy and the reality of a globalized economy that doesn't just neatly stop because the shooting starts.
So today we're going to unpack this mess for you. We're going to look at a specific incident at the Russian port of Novorossiysk.
The drone attacks.
Right, the drone attacks that happened back in November 2025. We're going to figure out why a pipeline in Kazakhstan is causing massive headaches in the Oval Office right now.
And we're going to try to understand how modern warfare actually works when your friends and your enemies are using the exact same plumbing.
Perfect way to put it. So we have to start by talking about the démarche.
It's a démarche. Yes.
I love that word. It sounds so fancy. But let's start right there. This news just broke this morning, correct?
Correct. Just a few hours ago in Washington, Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S., Olga Stefanishina, held a press conference. Now, usually, an ambassador holding a presser on the anniversary of an invasion, they are there to rally support. You expect high rhetoric, maybe a plea for more advanced jets or long-range missiles.
And I assume she did some of that standard diplomatic rallying.
She did. She absolutely did. But the headline came when she confirmed these rumors that had been swirling around D.C. for a few weeks now. She admitted that she received a formal communication from a senior State Department official regarding recent Ukrainian attacks.
Okay, let's pause on that phrase, formal communication. Because in my head, that could mean a text message or maybe a strongly worded email. But a démarche implies something much heavier.
Oh, it's much heavier. In the world of diplomacy, a démarche is a specific, formal protest. It's not a casual chat over coffee where you voice a concern.
Right.
It is a government officially saying, we have a serious problem with your conduct, and we are putting it on the record. For the U.S. to issue a démarche to a close ally like Ukraine in the middle of a war where they are nominally on the same side, that is a flashing red light.
It's like your spouse filing a formal legal complaint against you because you drove the shared car too fast.
A bit like that, yes. And the specifics of the complaint are what make this so fascinating. Ambassador Stefanishina was actually surprisingly candid about it today.
Yeah, I was reading the transcript of her remarks right before we started recording.
She explicitly said that the message from the State Department wasn't just a general warning to stop hitting Russian energy assets.
Right, I have the exact quote here. She said, quote, "It was fundamentally about the fact that U.S. economic interests were affected."
That is the key phrase right there. U.S. economic interests.
She goes on to say, that did indeed happen, and we have taken that into account, which, by the way, is just classic diplomatic speak for, we heard you, but we aren't promising to change our behavior.
Exactly. We acknowledge receipt of your complaint. But let's look at what that quote, that did indeed happen, actually refers to. Because to understand the anger in Washington, we have to go back to November of last year, November 2025.
The drone attacks.
Specifically, the Ukrainian naval drone attacks on the port of Novorossiysk.
Now, Novorossiysk is a major Russian naval base on the Black Sea. We've seen Ukraine target military ships there before. It seems like totally fair game in a war of this scale. Why was this specific attack in November different?
Because of what they aimed for this time. They didn't hit a destroyer or a submarine. The drones damaged something called a single-point mooring buoy.
A single-point mooring buoy. Okay. I'm going to need you to paint a picture here for me and for everyone listening, because I am imagining a little plastic floaty thing that marks a swimming lane at the beach. And I'm guessing that's not what we're talking about if blowing it up caused an international incident.
Not quite a plastic floaty, no. Think of it more like a massive floating gas station anchored miles offshore.
Miles offshore.
Yes. These are gigantic engineering structures. The Black Sea can get incredibly rough. You get intense storms, high waves. You can't always safely bring a supertanker, which is the size of a skyscraper, keep in mind, right up to a concrete dock. It's just too dangerous.
So they park the giant ship out in the deep water.
Right. And this buoy is the connection point. It's firmly anchored to the seabed, and massive pipes run all the way from the shore along the ocean floor and up into the buoy.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The tanker connects to it. And because it's single point of connection, the massive ship can rotate 360 degrees around the buoy with the wind and the waves, almost like a weather vane. It's really a brilliant piece of engineering.
It sounds fragile, though. If you have a naval drone, which is basically an unmanned jet ski packed with hundreds of pounds of explosives slamming into the side of that buoy.
It's highly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened in late November. The Ukrainian drones hit the buoys. They didn't sink a ship, but they smashed the connection point. And if you break the buoy, you can't load the oil onto the ships.
And if you can't load the oil onto the ships, the pipeline feeding those buoys gets backed up.
Precisely. And this isn't just any pipeline. This is the CPC, the Caspian Pipeline Consortium.
Yeah.
And this is where the American interest we talked about comes into play.
Okay, let's trace the pipe. Because my geography of this specific region is a little rusty. Where does this oil actually come from? It's not Russian oil, is it?
It starts in western Kazakhstan, at the Tengiz field. Now, this is arguably one of the most important and productive oil fields in the entire world. But here is the major problem. Kazakhstan is completely landlocked.
Right.
They have absolute oceans of oil beneath the ground, but no actual ocean to put it on to ship it out to the global market.
So they need a straw to get it out.
And that straw is the CPC pipeline. It runs 940 miles from the Kazakh steppe, crosses the border into Russia, traverses hundreds of miles of Russian territory, and ends at that maritime terminal near Novorossiysk on the Black Sea coast.
So it's Kazakh oil, but it absolutely has to travel through Russia to get to market.
Correct. And that creates a massive strategic vulnerability. But the ownership structure is even more complex than the geography. This isn't just a state-owned Kazakh or Russian project.
This is where we find the Americans.
This is where we find Chevron and ExxonMobil. Chevron holds a 15% stake in the consortium that owns the pipeline itself, and a massive 50% stake in Tengdashevroil, which is the operator of the oil field.
Wow. 50%.
ExxonMobil is there too. They hold a 7.5% stake in the pipeline.
Wait, pause for a second. We are 4 years into a war where the U.S. has sanctioned almost everything inside Russia. How is Chevron, a massive American corporate giant, still owning and operating a pipeline that runs right through Russian territory?
That is the ultimate paradox of this conflict. The global energy sector was carved out of the sanctions in very specific, deliberate ways because the world is entirely addicted to the oil.
So they basically said, sanction everything except the stuff we actually need to keep the lights on.
Basically. You have to understand the scale here. This single pipeline, the CPC, handles more than 1% of the entire world's total oil supply.
1% sounds small to a layperson, but in the global oil market, 1% is the difference between stable gas prices and a global recession, right?
It's massive. Taking 1% off the market overnight causes severe price shocks everywhere. From London to Tokyo to unsuspecting voters in Michigan, it is the primary export route for over 80% of Kazakhstan's crude oil.
Over 80%. So when Ukraine sent those naval drones in November, they weren't just poking Russia in the eye. They were effectively shutting down Chevron's main export route and strangling Kazakhstan's economy.
And the damage was very real. This wasn't just a theoretical threat or a minor delay. After the buoys were hit, operations at the terminal were severely disrupted. They physically couldn't load the ships.
And like you said, you can't just keep pumping oil into a pipe if it has nowhere to go at the other end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The storage tanks on the shore fill up within days.
So they had to turn off the actual oil wells back in Kazakhstan.
They had to throttle them back significantly. Citing reporting from the New York Times, production from the Tengiz field dropped by approximately 30% following the attacks.
A 30% drop. That is a catastrophic hit for any business.
It is. And this brings us to the actual money at stake. Chevron expects roughly $5 billion in free cash flow from its Kazakhstan operations in 2026.
Free cash flow. I hear that term thrown around on financial news networks all the time. What does it actually mean for a giant company like Chevron? Is that just pure profit?
Think of it as the company's actual take-home pay. It's the cash generated by the business after they have paid for all the operational expenses and the capital expenditures needed to keep the lights on and the drills running.
Okay.
This is the actual money they use to pay dividends to their shareholders, buy back stock, or pay down corporate debt. It is the absolute holy grail for investors.
So $5 billion of that fund money is riding on this one pipeline staying open.
Exactly. So when that flow suddenly stops because of a drone strike, that $5 billion is immediately at risk. And suddenly, the executives at Chevron are calling the State Department saying, you need to get your friends in Kiev to cut this out right now.
It's incredible leverage. But it puts the U.S. government in such a deeply hypocritical position, doesn't it? They are effectively saying, we want you to completely destroy the Russian war machine, but please don't touch the part of the Russian war machine that transports our oil.
It is a razor's edge for Washington. And Ukraine does this perfectly well. The Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, they view these terminals as 100% legitimate military targets. And frankly, from a strict military strategy standpoint, they are right.
Because Russia makes money on this pipeline too, I assume. It's not just a free transit route for Chevron.
Of course not. Russia gets substantial transit fees. The oil physically moves through their sovereign territory. They operate the port facilities. Every single dollar that flows through that infrastructure helps prop up the Russian economy, which in turn directly funds the missiles hitting Ukrainian cities.
So Ukraine's logic is very simple. We are bleeding Russia dry. And the U.S. response is, yeah, but you're bleeding us dry too.
The Ukrainians have been very blunt about their rationale here. They have stated publicly that every affected refinery or oil terminal represents millions of dollars lost to the Kremlin's war machine.
Right.
They aren't interested in the nuance of who owns the minority shares in a pipeline consortium. They are solely interested in stopping the cash flow to Moscow.
But the Kremlin must be absolutely loving this dynamic. I mean, usually when your enemy attacks your infrastructure, it's a bad day. But here, Ukraine attacks a port in Russia, and the direct result is that the United States gets mad at Ukraine. That's a massive geopolitical win for Putin.
It's a strategic gift for the Kremlin. They actually put out a statement recently regarding the CPC. They called the attacks on the infrastructure outrageous given their international significance.
Outrageous given their international significance. That is such a deliberately loaded phrase.
It is entirely deliberate. It's a very polite, veiled way of reminding Washington, hey, that's your oil too. Don't forget who controls the spigot. It perfectly drives a wedge between the Western allies. Russia can basically sit back and watch the U.S. State Department do the scolding for them.
And it forces Ukraine and its partners to scramble for workarounds. I saw in the source notes that Kazakhstan tried to reroute some of that oil after the November attack.
They did try. The disruption was severe enough that Kazakhstan had to start rerouting crude oil through a completely different pipeline, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan line.
Okay, the BTC line, which goes through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, completely bypassing Russian territory.
Right. It's the absolute dream route for Western strategists who want to isolate Russia. But the problem is pure physical capacity.
You just can't fit it all in?
You can't just shove that much displaced oil through a different, smaller pipe overnight. Think about it like trying to reroute all the rush hour traffic of Los Angeles onto a single residential side street.
Right.
It helps relieve a tiny bit of pressure, but it doesn't solve the fundamental problem. The CPC pipeline is still the main artery for that region.
This brings us back to the human element of this whole diplomatic mess. Ambassador Stefanishina is in Washington today. She gave this press conference, she admitted on the record, to receiving the démarche. But she has a very big night ahead of her tonight, doesn't she?
She certainly does. Tonight is Tuesday, and it happens to be the night of President Trump's State of the Union address. She will be there attending the speech.
That has to be an incredibly awkward seating arrangement in the gallery.
It perfectly captures the schizophrenia of the current geopolitical moment. On one hand, She is the primary representative of a nation fighting a brutal war for its survival, a nation the U.S. officially claims to support and arm.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, she represents a government that was just formally told by her hosts to stop messing with American corporate profits. She told reporters today she remains confident Ukraine is still a central issue on his agenda, despite this recent friction.
But you really have to wonder what the mood actually is behind closed doors at the State Department.
The tension has to be palpable.
It makes you wonder how much longer this tightrope act can possibly last. I mean, if this war drags on to a fifth year, a sixth year, eventually Ukraine is going to run out of safe targets to hit.
That's the real danger here. As Ukraine gets more desperate to break the grinding stalemate on the front lines, they are going to have to take bigger risks. They have to hit deeper into Russian territory and hit harder.
And the more they do that, the more likely they are to hit something that secretly belongs to a Western bank, or a European pension fund, or an American oil major.
And if they do that, does the political support in the West finally crumble? That's a very real possibility. If gas prices suddenly spike to $6 or $7 a gallon in the U.S. because of a Ukrainian drone strike on a Russian port, how does the American voter react to that?
Right. Do they blame Russia for starting the war, or do they blame the people launching the drones that broke the gas supply? It really challenges our whole traditional concept of total war. We look back at World War II, and we think of the Allies just bombing German industry into dust with no hesitation.
Right.
But imagine if General Motors had a massive, profitable factory in the middle of Berlin that was secretly supplying the U.S. economy, and the Allies had to carefully fly around it and avoid bombing it while still trying to win the war.
That's a fascinating way to look at it. Actually, there were some strange historical parallels with certain corporate subsidiaries in Germany back then, but the global integration today is just on a totally different level.
It's everywhere.
The supply chains are so deeply entangled that you literally cannot pull them apart without tearing the whole global economy down.
It's like two people fighting to the death inside a house, but they co-own all the expensive furniture.
That is a perfect analogy. Neither of them really wants to smash the giant flat-screen TV, but one of them is throwing heavy rocks at the other one who happens to be standing right in front of it.
So bringing it back to today, Ambassador Stefanishina says they took the formal complaint into account. What does that actually mean for the next few months of this war? Do the drone strikes on the Black Sea ports just stop entirely?
For now, maybe. They might shift their operational focus to targets that are purely Russian-owned, like military airfields or domestic refineries that don't export Western crude.
But the temptation is always going to be there.
The capability is definitely there.
Yeah.
The naval drones clearly work. The mooring buoys remain highly vulnerable targets. And if Russia pushes hard on the front lines this spring, Kiev might just decide that the diplomatic heat from Washington is worth the severe economic damage they can inflict on the enemy.
It's a massive game of chicken.
High-stakes chicken with the entire global economy in the balance.
I want to zoom out for just a second before we wrap up. We've been talking a lot about pipelines and cash flow into marches, but for the listener tuning in, why does this specific incident matter? Aside from the fact that it's just a deeply interesting story about how messy the world is?
It matters because it reveals the absolute limits of superpower influence. We tend to think that the U.S. can just snap its fingers, write a check, and dictate exactly how a proxy war is fought.
Right, the U.S. is paying for it, so they make the rules.
But this démarche shows that corporate interests, companies like Chevron and Exxon, they have a permanent seat at the war room table, whether we voted for them to be there or not.
And it matters because of that 1% of the global oil supply we mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. If you are driving a car to work today, or buying groceries that were trucked across the country to your local store, your daily life is financially connected to that single-point mooring buoy bobbing in the Black Sea. Its physical safety is your wallet's safety.
Which is just a terrifying thought, honestly, that my grocery bill next month heavily depends on whether a 20-something Ukrainian drone operator decides to push a button on a random Tuesday morning.
That is the incredibly fragile reality of 2026.
You know, when we started out this deep dive, I thought we were just going to talk about a weird diplomatic spat between allies. But it really feels like we're talking at the end of an era. The end of this comforting idea that you can have clear good guys and bad guys and draw solid, clean lines on a map.
The map is just completely covered in cobwebs of pipelines and fiber optic cables now.
Yeah.
You really can't cut one strand to hurt your enemy without shaking the entire web and catching yourself in it.
So As we watch the State of the Union address tonight, I think I'm going to be looking at the Ukrainian ambassador a little differently, not just as a diplomat asking for weapons, but as someone trying to navigate a minefield that is half military and half corporate.
It is arguably the hardest job in Washington right now.
Before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought to mull over. We talk a lot on the show about sanctions and economic warfare. We always want to completely isolate the enemy. But is it even theoretically possible to truly isolate an enemy like Russia when our own major companies have spent the last 30 years meticulously building and funding their infrastructure?
And when our own domestic economy heavily relies on the resources that flow out through that very same infrastructure.
Exactly. Are we actually protecting the global economy, or are we just protecting our own profitable investments sitting in the enemy's backyard? And at what point does protecting those financial investments end up costing us the entire war?
That is the question that should keep military strategists up at night.
It's definitely going to keep me up tonight. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep asking the hard questions. Always keep following the money, and we'll see you on the next one.